Welcome to From Auschwitz to Hollywood, Jack Garfein, the Wild One, in our series Flight or Fight, Stories of Artists Under Repression. We thank Jewish story partners and Good Dogs for making this event possible and for bringing high-quality films on diverse Jewish subjects to a wide range of audiences in educational settings. I'm Rachel Stern, Executive Director of the Fritz Ascher Society for Persecuted, Ostracized, and Banned Art based in New York. Today, I'm honored to introduce two esteemed speakers. Chantal Perrin is a French producer and director and has been the executive of Petite Maison Production since 2006, supporting filmmakers with a unique voice, as well as contemporary artists, Sophie Calle, Terence Coe, Cindy Sherman, on projects in a wide range of formats. In 1982, Atelier Lalanne, her first movie as a director about sculptors Claude and Françoise Lalanne, won first prize at the International Festival of Films on Art in Paris. She then began working as a first assistant director and line producer on films with directors Terry Gilliam, Adrienne Lien, Jean-Paul Rappeneau, Claude Miller, Maurice Pialat, and Jean-Jacques Arnaud, among others. Since then, she has produced and directed many documentaries for the TV channels Arte, Canal Plus, and France Television, and works regularly with various national and international broadcasters. She has focused her efforts on exploring important social issues, traditional African medicine, for example, illegal love, Go Green Citizens, traditional African medicine, Lyme disease, a silent epidemic, and on depicting the lives and legacies of artists. Currently, she continues to work for French television on the documentary series Thalassa as a producer and author, while developing international co-productions and high-quality art films at Petite Maison Production, which have gone on to screen at Cannes, Sundance, and numerous other international festivals. More recently, Lady of the Gobi, a documentary shot in Mongolia she wrote and produced, won the BFI Grierson Award. Ori Soltes teaches at Georgetown University across the disciplines of theology, art history, philosophy, and politics. He's the former director and curator of the Bnei B'rith Klutznik National Jewish Museum, where he curated some 80 exhibitions. He's the author of several hundred articles and catalog essays, and the author or editor of 25 books, including The Ashen Rainbow, The Holocaust and the Arts, Symbols of Faith, How Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Art Draw from the Same Source, and Tradition and Transformation, 3 Millennia of Jewish Art and Architecture. After the conversation, there will be time for Q&A, so please post your questions. I now welcome Chantal and Ori. Welcome and thank you for being here with us. And I give over to Ori to first show a trailer of the film, The Wild One, and then start the conversation with Chantal.
Thank you, Rachel. And of course, Chantal, thanks for being here with us. And as Rachel said, in just a moment, I'm going to show you a trailer, although I hope everyone has seen the film. And if not, you'll still have an opportunity to see it afterwards, because The Wild One is something magnificent to behold. It is a documentary, but it doesn't feel like a documentary. It feels like a feature film. It has that kind of an arc. It has that kind of an emotional content. You don't realize you've been through an hour and a half and you're sorry and you can't believe it's already ending when it ends. The story is, of course, about a now not overly well-known director who was brilliant, who was extraordinary, who was outside the box in so many ways. And as a consequence of that, ran afoul of some of the powers that be, or the powers that were, beginning with Sam Spiegel, the great producer. And as a consequence, his career went in different directions and not the one that perhaps at the outset he might have hoped. I am going to begin, as Rachel said, by sharing my screen and showing you the trailer And let's just hope this works out as it should. We've got that. And
Jack became a great theorist of acting. How do you approach the actor? What's the nature of acting? A director with masterfully made films that can be placed at the beginning of independent film in America.
I wanted to be an actor. It wasn't a choice. It was a calling. It was 1946 when I arrived in New York.
When I first came here, I had nobody, and I followed my intuition.
One day, Carol Baker arrived at the studio. This was the start of a wild love affair. I landed a 10-picture deal with Columbia, and Carol was cast in the starring role with James Dean in the movie Giant. Our success could only multiply, or so I thought.
What's happened? Pourquoi est-ce que Hollywood vous en veut?
Maybe the guy was cursed. Maybe it was his background.
Having lived through a historical nightmare, he brought to his work an understanding of the human condition, an understanding of tragedy that can't be duplicated unless you've lived it.
When the capos come near you and they ask you to go to their barracks to shine their shoes, start coughing, act sick, and they'll leave you alone. The whole theory of acting depends on the subconscious part. You have to use your life.
well, if you haven't seen it, you sure as hell better see it soon because it's incredible. I want to begin by making a few comments about the film, which is directed primarily to those who have seen it. And if you haven't, keep these things in mind when you do. And then I want to pose some questions to Chantal, and a dialogue will ensue. So my first comment applies to the name. It's called The Wild One. And of course, as you learned in the film, Jack was able to complete 2 films, each extraordinary and distinct in its own way. One was called The Strange One. The other is called Something Wild. So a question I'm going to pose to Chantal later on, was that a conscious or an unconscious decision, essentially to affect a combination of those 2 film titles in the title of her film about Jack Garfein?
Yes, it was
You
conscious.
can ask that question now.
It was conscious. Can you hear me well? Yeah.
Yes.
Of course it was conscious. But it also goes very well with Jack, who's, someone who doesn't deal with freedom, freedom, full freedom. That was he was after. And that was the beginning of his problems in Hollywood, because he wouldn't take no for an answer. Or, the story goes, the story in the film about not having any Afro-American actors in the film. And he just wouldn't do it. He just did the short.
He would not do it, did it? Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't, obey. and he shot and edited the scenes, and it cost him a 10-film deal with Columbia.
Yeah.
Which is the end of his career.
More. Yeah, perhaps more than that, because who knows where else he might have and didn't because of that cutoff point. So it was a brilliant choice of a title in the first place, and he surely was the wild one.
Yes.
And of course, as those of you who have seen this will have perhaps recognized by the clips from his work that's in the film, that Chantal, from the opening sequence and the little anticipatory moments with figures and moments you'll see in the film, the whole thing functions, the whole editing process reminds me of his films, not in a slavish way, not an overly heavy-handed way, but in a very light way. You only realize it about halfway through the film. You realize, my God, this is form and content married to each other. And of course, the shifting back, not just between the recreations of his experience and documentary footage of that time and era with what's happening afterwards and what's happening currently with the people who are being interviewed, the actors, the producers, the directors, but the very clever, I appreciated the switching between black and white and color, again, not in an obvious way, because things that you would have expected still to be in black and white are in color. Things that you might have expected to be in color were in black and white. So it was a very interesting marriage of those two sides of his experience, what's conscious, what's unconscious, what he suffered, what he endured in the past, what he brought to the table in being a creator in the present. Details, the burning, when you talk about the upset on the part of the moral authorities, when the play upon which the film, The Strange One, was based, End as a Man, a great name for a play, to have been the first play directed by Jack Garfein, who surely ended as a man, but that's neither here nor there. The upset with the morality code and the burning of books. And immediately, to someone who's familiar with the Holocaust, of course, that connoted the Nazi book burnings. If it didn't, later on, if you remembered, in your film, you actually see the Nazi book burnings, and you might be clever enough to make that connection even as it's being made for you. And if you don't get it, but then you get it and you make that sort of a connection. The ghosting, the sense of ghosts, the way in which you edited, which again reminded me of the way in which he did his editing, where you get a lot of a sense of ghosts, and ghosts connote dreams and ghosts connote memories. So there is a lot that is very phantasmagorical in this essentially brutal story, and yet it's got these not just phantasmagorical, but very soft qualities to it. That's part of what makes it so compelling. The telling has a softness to it that defies the harshness and the hardness of the story. And indeed, of both films that he managed to make are about harshness, hardness, human cruelty, the kind of cruelty he experienced, and the kind of cruelty that he could therefore empathize with, on the part of those being victimized by Ben Gazzara in The Strange One, or of course of his wife, Carol Baker, being raped, victimized in Something Wild. These films 4 years apart from each other, just astonishing. And all these details, the birds that every so often we see flying around the sky, but also relate back to that kind of imagery that he himself was wont to use. The eyes, every so often, those slow closing in on the eyes, and we watch the pupil dilate. We're watching the eye that is watching, this sense of things that are watching, just as, again and again in the course of your film, we are watching him watch clips from the film or images from people he knew, or beginning and even more so at the end, those wonderful images of Marcel Marceau, himself a renowned actor, right?
And a friend of Jack's.
And a friend of Jack's, that's right. And of course, someone who had suffered through the Holocaust, which is not something that most people who know about they're not aware of it. There was a film made about him in that regard, I think 4 or 5 years ago. But other than that, no one knew about that sort of that part of his life. The lines that came right out of Jack himself in his narrative and the way you placed them. This discussion that one of the acting students is having, saying, well, no, I'm sorry, forgive me. It was his daughter who says, we weren't supposed to cry. We weren't supposed to cry. And you're thinking, well, okay, typical standard issue, American male of the 50s, you're tough, you don't cry. Boys are taught not to cry. Only later on, you realize when he is relating that absolutely heartrending series of passages with respect to his mother, and he reminds us that he was told not to cry. Just as that incredible line that comes relatively early on in the film after the initial success that was crushed by Sam Spiegel because distribution was impossible, even though they had already castrated The Strange Man by removing 20 minutes, crucial minutes from the film, it still wasn't really being allowed out. And he says, you know, people wonder what happened to me. Where did I disappear to? I didn't disappear. I just changed places. And I thought, this is not just about your life. It's about the life of so many others with whom you empathize, who have had experiences analogous to or like yours, or like Carol Baker in Something Wild. Some people do disappear. They give up, they disappear. He didn't give up. He didn't disappear. He found his own film company with his wife. He simply changed gears. I just changed places. Such a wonderful, wonderful mode of self-reflection, which brings me to perhaps my last comment before turning to questions for you, Chantal. And that is, among these various ways in which you as a producer, director, editor, manipulate the visuals before your viewer, so that, as I said, you know, we see him seeing, we're looking over his shoulder again and again, but we also, toward the end, we see him reflected, and he talks about how the day that the last camp he was in was liberated, how he just stumbled upon his own reflection, and he was 43 pounds. And it's like, he didn't recognize who that was. I was reminded immediately of the very end of Elie Wiesel's memoir, Night, where in the hospital where he's recovering, he sees a mirror, and it's the first time he's seen himself in whatever it is, 4, 5, 6 years. And the face that looked back at him was not his own. But the face that Jack saw that was not his own, it was a face that was about to change places, because he would come to the United States as a young refugee and manage, of course, to make his way in a most extraordinary path. Which brings me to the first question for you. How did you discover him? What caused you to become interested in telling this story? How long did it take you? Tell me about it. Tell us about it.
The director Tessa, who herself is an artist, that's why the film is so well shot. It's because she takes care of every single image. She will work on every single image, have you noticed? And she was introduced to Jack through Wes Anderson's producer. She felt that Tessa was the one person to be able to, you know, to treat such a...
Well, they could have gotten Fritz Lang. They could have gotten Fritz Lang, but he wasn't available, I don't think.
Who?
Fritz Lang. Fritz
Oh,
Lang.
right. He wasn't available, right. So they turned to Tessa, and then she met him. They had lunch in a, you know, poor little place in the 20th arrondissement, in a sort of a Chinese shop. And she was fascinated because the guy, I mean, every time we had a drink at the office and he was there, all the girls and boys, everybody was surrounding him and listening to him. He wouldn't stop telling stories, but he was really, really interesting and funny. And, you know, he was a storyteller. He's a raconteur very much. And so she was fascinated. And so he saw a film she'd done before. We'd produced also about Leos Carax, the filmmaker. Don't know if you heard of him. It's called Mr. X, and she won a prize, which she was selected at Sundance for that. And so he saw that film and he thought, okay, if she treats me like she treated Garth, then I'm okay. Because he's a difficult man. I don't think it's easy to deal with him. He's a character.
Yeah.
And so they started together, and it took it was difficult because it was a difficult film to finance because it was shot in Germany, France, east of the United States, and west of the United. So 4 locations, and so it took a while to be able to finance it. So every time we had a little finance, we'd jump on, on the camera and shoot more, and it was difficult. And also, it's not the kind of film that you can, you take your camera and you go and get the interview. No, that was a film where we we had to have a DOP, director of photography, and electricians, and a studio, and lights, and and those screens that you see in the studio. So we did it all little by little, but as the director wanted, and it took years. It took about 5 years, really. Yeah.
Well, it was worth every minute of the 5 years. At least I can say that. Because the outcome, the result is just so spectacular. It's the perfect storm between being emotionally fulfilling and intellectually fulfilling, to say nothing of visually fulfilling. The music, I mean, that's something that I tend to be very conscious of. And every element of that second soundtrack, music or other sounds that were non-musical, was, I thought, so, pun intended, in tune with what was happening on the screen and the story that was being told. Aside, obviously, from financing, what was the most challenging or most difficult moment, or the most difficult stretch, the most difficult part of the process?
The problem was that before COVID, it started being really bad, feeling really bad before COVID. And so we realized that the plan we had was no longer working. And the plan was, as this fantastic director of actors, we wanted him to direct on stage with young actor studio students from Actor Studio West, who was collaborating with us. So we wanted him to direct pieces, the scenes of his life that he was about.
Yes.
That would have been amazing, And suddenly we had to realize and we had the Chinese theater, another beautiful Hollywood old theater that was planned to be the location. So we had to realize that wouldn't be possible. He was feeling really bad. He wasn't that old. I mean, he was 87, and
right.
Some people at that age, but he was really really bad. So we had to change, and the film that was written, the film that was planned, was like on the ground, right? It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to make a film out of what we had, and what we had to abandon, and what we could think of to still make film. So that was bad. That was bad.
Well, because when you make a feature, you've storyboarded, you've scripted, you know where it's going to begin and where it's going to end. There may be some changes, but basically you've got it. But a documentary is a different animal. So how did you know, when did you know how it was going to end? And I'll add to a second sort of question to that, because I know Jack passed away before the film was done, correct? So how did that, I mean, you just mentioned something about that, but elaborate a little bit, both on how that affected things and how you realized, okay, this is how we're going to end this? Was there anything in particular that sparked your thinking about that?
Well, I don't. What do you want to know? Sorry, I don't understand exactly what you want.
Okay, I want to know at what point did you realize how you wanted to end the film?
You mean
yeah.
like Picasso? Okay,
No,
that's it.
yeah.
Okay.
Right. How the film was going to come to an end? Had
Well,
you made that decision when he was still alive, or did you make that decision after he was gone?
Well, the editing wasn't finished when he died, so we didn't see anything, which was really sad, sad for everyone. Even the musician was very sad, and every time he introduces the film, he always thinks of Jack as, and the joy he would have had, I'm sure. But we still have his kids.
That's true.
Yeah, we still have Blanche and Herschel and another kid who lives here in Paris. So important. I think they had good reactions. We saw Blanche in New York's screening, and she seemed happy with the film.
It's interesting because she became an actress, right? And with some success, although in the film, she makes the observation that watching her parents' lives fall apart helped her realize that maybe that's not the direction to go in, or at least it's a precarious direction, unless I misunderstood that moment.
Don't give up everything. Don't give everything to the business, to the, yeah, that's what she keeps saying. Yeah. That's not where you will be. You'll never be happy, comforted, only when you work, only when you're on stage, only when you're shooting, but the rest of the time it's going to be misery. Yeah.
I've asked you this before, but I'll ask it again if you don't mind, about Carol, because Carol Baker and he, of course, split up. One could almost feel it coming in the way things were developing, because it would be un-Hollywood-esque for her career to be taking off and his career, for all the wrong reasons, to be tanking. Not because he was drunk, not because he was lazy, not because he ran out of ideas, but because the politics of his world were such that people couldn't, the people who needed to let him breathe couldn't appreciate what he was doing. But if his was going down in a certain way with respect to Hollywood and hers was starting to blossom, it almost seemed inevitable that the relationship come to an end.
His attitude, like there was a delay in this Henry Miller adaptation of Henry Miller's book, and so the studio kept postponing the beginning of the shoot. And what do? I mean, what does he decide to do? He sues the Columbia. How can you do that? How stupid! Everybody says, there's no way, why not, me attacking Universal? It's the same. So there was a problem there, and he really put her career to, down at risk because of doing that. Nobody wanted them anymore. It was the cursed couple, their trouble.
Yeah. And what were the delays in the Henry Miller project natural? I mean, was it just because there were delays? Because of course there can be delays. Often there are. Or was this more something personal?
We don't really know. Maybe there was some fights inside, the studio, between people saying, well, let's do it because it's modern. Oh, no, let's not do it because it's too this and that. So maybe there was that sort of discussion, But for him, he was a friend of Henry Miller's.
Yes. He referred to him in the film as his best friend, I think.
I think, yeah. One
Yeah.
of, and Henry Miller wrote a little novel, a little portrait of his friends. It's a novel book, you know it,
Uh-huh.
about my friends and my bicycle.
Yes, of course, of course, of course. Yes, yes, yes.
The
Ah,
Jack in the lot.
let me ask you another, it's not exactly technical, but that's sort of a question. How did you fix on Willem Dafoe, who I thought did a beautiful job as the narrator, as Jack, so to speak? How
So
did you fix on him?
we were very lucky for many reasons. First, she was obsessed. The director Tessa, she was obsessed with his voice. She knew he would be just right, you know, to edit with Jack's voice. They would be very close and it would work. So she knew that, and very luckily, Gael, the musician, had been working with Robert Wilson. You know, Bob Wilson
Yes.
on stage. And he and Willem Dafoe was in quite a few plays by Bob Wilson. And so they knew each other, Gael and Willem. And Gael knew that Willem Dafoe was a very simple man and very artistic.
Yes.
All these decisions are very artistic. You see that. And so he agreed to do a test that, you know, we used for the trailer. And he was very sweet. And Tessa and Gael went to Rome, where he lives with his partner. And they had a wonderful time. They rented a studio, and it was all very simple, very easy. Couldn't believe it. I don't think he even charged anything much more than what anybody would charge. I mean, he was amazing. He's a beautiful man.
He is. And I also, you know, one of the things I appreciated about how his voice worked with the film was the pacing. Because his narration, right, he could have been speaking faster. He didn't. He spoke in a way that very much mirrored the way the whole film was unfolding in this very carefully paced, just the right, not too slow, not too fast, but just not allowing you to rush to get to the next scene or the next word or the next idea, but leading you kind of gently in a way that, again, is completely antithetical to the story that's being told, which is anything but gentle in terms of its main characters. So yeah, I applaud that choice very, very much. What else can you tell us about what you've been doing since the film was finished, besides, of course, trying to get it distributed is my first guess.
We've just shot a film in Mongolia about this woman truck driver carrying 100 tons of coal from the southern Gobi desert coal mines to the Chinese border. And that's her life. She's got 3 kids, and she's an amazing woman. She's just amazing. And the way she conveys, the way she tells about her life, and so is amazing. You know, she's exceptional. So we did this film. We have a 26 minutes version that you can view on the Guardian website, and the film's called The Lady of the Gobi. Lady of the Gobi. That's the 26 minutes version, and we are finishing the edit of 80 minutes story about.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you like interesting, different, and unusual stories of rugged individualists, very clearly.
Yes, right.
You know, I noticed a question in the chat while we were in the middle, to which I know the answer, but I'll leave you to answer it anyway. So there. And that is when he describes how his mother pushed him in the train from their group to the adult men's group. And of course, he was at that time not only brokenhearted by what he saw as the definitive rejection, later on, he understood that what she was doing was saving his life. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, Miss, we just had the feeling that he realized very late that, you know, this hatred kept him alive, maybe, you know.
Wow.
I don't know.
So it's interesting because he is so perceptive in so many ways, and yet that was such a scar for him that he
and also
couldn't.
he was very jealous from the beginning. He was jealous of his daughter, as you know, you have that in every family.
Yes. You mean his sister? You said his daughter, meant his sister.
Sorry.
Yes.
So that's also maybe triggering his pain when he saw the rejection of his mother, because he was so jealous, you know, what he wanted. He wanted to be with her, and he wanted to be first.
You know, and he had referred earlier on, as things were starting to get ugly, and they were going to be rounded up, and then his mother had the plan of going to the gypsies and so on. He commented on his mother's genius, his mother's cleverness, as having saved them. And no one would have known what we know now. No one would have known at that moment that she was saving his life, but she instinctively knew, because she and his sister perished, and had he stayed with them, he would have perished, but being shoved over to the adult males. And he also had an instinct to say, whatever he said, I'm 16 or I'm 18, when he was obviously much younger than that.
Instead of saying 13, he said 16. Yeah, right.
Right. So Mengele would have sent him immediately in the other direction. So it was part of a whole process of, and it goes back to what he says toward the beginning of the film, you know, I didn't become an actor just because, you know, it's something I thought of doing. I needed to. It saved my life, acting, and then it was repeated by others later on in the film. Acting is something that you have to do to save your life. And of course, in his case, he even talks about it in certain literal ways, like his little anecdote about the SS officers liking little boys, and his uncle having said to him, cough, so they think you're ill, and how that was his first acting job, or his first acting role. Just, you know, there's so many nuggets, Chantal, throughout the course of the film that, you know, you always think you've read or heard about anything and everything you can, or you've seen everything you can about stuff that has to do with the Holocaust and related kinds of phenomena. And one hasn't. The last page in the book hasn't been turned. And you've turned an extraordinary page in that book.
I would like to add is what always puzzled me is that this guy is arriving at 15. He doesn't speak English, of course. And he's with his uncle, and the uncle and aunt say, you don't go out. It's danger everywhere. So, you know, he had enough of it. He ended up having his own little room in town so that, you know, he could do any. But what was amazing is that he managed to join the new school. You know, that school?
Yes.
That where all those people, professors from the Eastern Europe would come.
Right, all those refugees were teaching there. Yeah.
And were teaching there, all kinds of philosophers, all kinds of wonderful people, and artists and stage directors. And can you imagine that he managed to be in the place? It doesn't exist anymore, does it?
It does, but it's different, but it does.
It's different, not as it is. It's beautiful premises as well, also. And he managed to be in the place, you know, where Marlon Brando, where everybody went through, and the place where the actor studio was born, because Strasbourg was there before he founded the actor studio. So that was amazing. He doesn't speak English. He finds himself in the best school that he could attend. in the whole of America. He goes there, and then he goes to the actor studio. I mean, his parcours, the way he
Right.
he
In the corridor too. He's on the course in the
nice.
on the way toward.
It's like you know,
It is amazing.
the royal way.
And Lee Strasberg wasn't exactly an easy fellow, but liked him, and also I gather was very rough on him because he wanted to be the tough father.
I'm not sure he was a tough father with Jack. I think he helped Jack. I think Jack was tough. Jack wanted to have it his own way. And he thought that Lee Strasberg was being too, pushed them too much to be
the edge.
Hysterical. And he didn't appreciate that. He thought Lee was a bit manipulative with some stars, you know,
Yes.
like. So yeah, at one point he couldn't bear to see the ways that he was teaching, but I think Lee Strasberg saved him very much, and he lived at his place, and they were very close, and I think he wasn't that bad, you know. He was just Lee Strasberg. And like Garfein is too much. Lee Strasberg was too much. All those people are too much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how Jack felt that Lee Strasberg drove people virtually over the edge, and he felt that he could relate to actors in a way that wouldn't do that to them. By the way, he also acted. Pacino, right, was one of his students, and Pacino in Godfather 2 suggested that he come on board. It was a small role, but he was nominated for a supporting, what do you call it, supporting actor, Academy Award.
Strasberg. Strasberg.
No. Jack Garfein was.
Strasberg is in The Godfather.
Oh, it's Strasberg who was, not Garfein. Okay, then I got that one backwards.
Yeah, he has a part. I think he was a lawyer, I think.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, amazing. Well, Chantal, shall we open this up for questions? Are there questions? Rachel, you want to join us and see if there are questions that either you have or that in the Q&A or chat have been raised by people?
Yes, just give me a second.
We're happy to see your face.
It is about to happen. There we go.
There we go. There we go. Welcome back.
Yes. Of course, there are questions. A lot of questions were okay. Somebody asked whether Garfein had any problems with McCarthy or HOHC. How do you say that?
The House On-American Activities.
Yeah.
Because of being accused, as many Hollywood people, lefties were, right, of being communists.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't believe you.
Yeah, I think his film had problems with the commission. Right. Yeah, no, I mean they didn't point it because of the participation of Afro-American, but because there was some hints of homosexuality in the groups in the army. Things like that were a problem for the commission.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he himself was not.
He wasn't shown to the. I mean, he didn't have a trial like Kazan or others did, but his film had problems.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it was very interesting to learn how many restrictions filmmakers, writers had at that time as well in terms of picking certain themes or how they relate certain themes.
Even if you approach the bed too much. You know?
Yeah, and the scenes of rape that were too too authentic, and all these restrictions he
Right.
decided to go against.
But all of that is in a certain fundamental way different from McCarthy and the HUAC, because that was specifically about communism.
Right.
So that was the one issue, because Elie Kazan was before that in that kind of a situation, but he was not, right? I don't believe he was accused by anyone of being a communist. He was all the other wrong things, but not that.
Yeah. Yeah. So and then there are questions about his family again, whether Jack Garfein's mother rejected him in order for his life to be saved. Would he have perished if he had remained with his mother and sister? That was...
Yes, of course, because they went straight to the oven. Sorry,
yeah.
Yeah. Right. All the babies, the kids and the women were taken in Auschwitz anyway to
immediately.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting how long he harbored his anger against his mother, how long it took him to understand why she did it. But of course, it's a young boy's emotional response of rejection that he had, that came out of his jealousy also towards his sister. So it makes a lot of sense.
By the way, was his sister older or younger than he?
Younger. She was 9. He was 13.
That, but I wasn't sure. Okay.
That's very emotional when the girl says, I'm a Jewish, well, I will die as a Jewish. It's amazing. I wanted to continue, the idea that he went to the new school, then he went to then he met Lee Strasberg and went to the actor studio. But right away, he directed a play which became successful. And in the play, he had, Steve McQueen, James Dean, Ben Gazzara, and Bruce Dern, all these amazing actors. And he was what? He was 23, 20. I mean, we are what? Not even 7 years after he's coming out of the camps. So that is amazing also in his career. That, and a few years later, 2 or 3 years later, he's in Hollywood. So it's not even 10 years after he came out of the camp. So that is also something that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. This guy, he doesn't speak English. You find him 8 years later being a success on Broadway and being given such a beautiful film in Hollywood, because the producer wanted Kazan to do it, but it's a film. Right?
Kazan was the one who said, no, the kid's the right guy to do it.
Yeah.
Again, apropos of this, all of his levels of perceptiveness and yet his not being able to recognize what his mother actually had done for him rather than to him till much, much, much later. By contrast, the impression I had from the film is that he didn't hold a grudge against Sam Spiegel, who clearly was the man behind what became the disaster rather than the screaming success of his first film. And the reason I say that is because when he refers to him in the narrative, he calls him Sam. Sam and I were da-da-da-da. That didn't sound like someone who is angry or has a grudge against him. Because I would imagine otherwise you'd say, well, Spiegel, But Sam...
Because he knows he had a hard head himself. He knows, as I said, he wouldn't take no for an answer. So at the beginning, they were very friendly to each other. Eastern Europe people, they had some connections. Yeah. But then then it went bad. It went really bad. Yeah.
Alas. Rachel, we seem to be getting a lot of questions about how to see either or both of those films. Well, Natalia's question, I think, is about how to watch this film. And if you're part of this, webinar, then you should have, if you signed up for it, you would have received a, what do you call it? A link. So this film can still be watched, I think, for another couple of days.
So this
ahead.
film can be watched until streaming is open until Sunday. And I will send that information out with a follow-up email. And I will also see whether the 2 films that Jack Garfein made are available online. So if yes, I will send a link for those as well. So just wait for the follow-up email and you will receive that information. And of course, also a link to the recording of this conversation, so you can rewatch it or send it out as well. Someone is asking, did he have a good relationship with his children and grandchildren, aside from what his daughter said in the film?
Sorry, yes, because someone was asking where to see the film, and I can see it on YouTube. Strange Ones on YouTube.
Okay.
And I know that Something Wild, and it's also on the Internet Archives.org. And otherwise, I know that the other film is also, you can also see the second film.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, they're easy to find. There's no problem for watching those.
And a question, the cut of the Strange One that one can find, is it the one that they...
There's just one cut. I don't think there wasn't a director's cut at the time,
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
no, there's just one cut, one and only cut. Submitting the film to the IDFA doc. Yeah, I think when you've been chosen by an important festival, a first grade festival like Tribeca, Amsterdam won't take you, or Cannes won't take you,
Wow.
Yeah. You can go to the market, but not to the selection.
Okay.
That's
a whole business in itself to get the film out.
And someone also asked, Chantal, if you could elaborate, if you can, a little bit on the comment that Blanche, his daughter, made about that being difficult for her when her father shared with her stories of his early experiences.
It's all about the transmission of trauma, and whether it's better to speak about it or hide it. That's the whole question. He was very open. Both kids say that. I see a question about the relationship we had with these kids. We had very good relationship. They were wonderful with us. But the question was would it be better if he hadn't spoken so openly about what happened to him? Apparently, Blanche, his daughter, she suffered, and when she was small, she had those dreams that Nazi would come and get her. And Herschel, the boy, was not traumatized at all. So it's very difficult whether to tell or not tell. That is the question, really.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And was the film, I assume the answer is yes, well received in Europe and the other places where it has been seen?
The film, yes. Yeah, it's working. We have a sad moment at present we haven't been able to. I mean, we have maybe we haven't tried enough to have it in America, shown in America. It is shown in universities or some shows like yours, but we don't have a distribution yet in America. But we're working on it. Otherwise, it's been all around the planet. I mean, in Australia, Poland, so many places, but not America. And it's been shot in America. He was American. It's an American story more than European, both European and American, but also an American story. So, And did Judaism play a part in his life after surviving the Holocaust? I think so. Yes, he was. He was very. Comment on dit?
What?
He was a scholar. He'd learned a lot from his father, and he could be a rabbi, really.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, he could be a rabbi.
Interesting. Wow. Well, his synagogue was the theater. That's where he prayed, and that's where he preached.
Yes, but also I think he was still close to his religion.
Yeah.
But he had this huge brain, that he knew so many plays and so many things about theater and so many things about religion and literature, and he was a library on his own. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I was, he said, I really liked the way you ended the film with his statements about the nature of an artist, really, and about the importance of his work, because he was an artist of the really very traditional sense of being an artist. So he says in the end, he says, the whole theory of acting depends on the subconscious part, which means that acting, like all the other arts, has to be personal. You have to use your life. And I thought, and in another place, he says, imagination is your memory, meaning imagination is not this idea that you pops into your head from outer outer universe. It pops into your mind because you activate some parts of memories, and I thought that was a really very deep observation about the nature of the arts, and of the nature of being an actor. And I think that's really what makes his work also so touching and so deeply human and touching, that he channels his experiences into his acting and filmmaking. And somehow I feel like in the in his work as a filmmaker and actor, he brings together his trauma with, he channels his trauma into something very productive that touches every person that is confronted with it.
And that, of course, is essential to the to the method acting style of Strasberg and before him Stanislavski. The idea that you bring out of yourself memories of something that will enable you to respond to the moment on stage or on screen with the absolute genuineness, because it's coming out of something you experienced. And in his case, it was a whole half a decade and more of experience that he was able to channel. So I agree with you, Rachel. I mean, very important how it ended. Yeah. Yeah.
As she says, the actress, the French actress, you know, who was Kieslowski's film, Irene Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
Irene Jacob, she's important here. She says that he wouldn't tell you how to act, but he would feed you with lots of ideas of why and where are they going and why does he do that, and should he, you know, feeding the scene with lots of that would help you, but in a very subtle way, not in, you know, he wasn't showing you how to act.
Yes.
He was feeding you. That's
Yeah.
a good.
Yes, excellent.
So
Excellent.
in this way, I feel you might have even undervalued, even with this film, undervalued his impact on future on acting, in the future of acting and the future of filmmaking as well. You know.
Well, I suppose with more emphasis, but the film was about.
I know.
Was about his career, right? But obviously, if you did an epilogue talking about his career as an acting teacher and what was happening in the Artist Studio West and all the people whom he affected, you're right. I mean, that'd be a whole additional story about his influence. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you've got another film to make, Chantal.
There we go.
About
yes,
we'll
about
call it the afterlife of the wild one.
Somebody should make a film about Carol Baker.
Yes. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, that woman, she's such a writer. I saw a lot of interviews of her on YouTube and on archives.org. She's amazing. She's really interesting. She really tells you what Hollywood is about for a young actress.
Yeah.
When the first time she went to, she arrived in Hollywood because she was chosen to shoot Giant with James Dean and Elizabeth Taylor, and so she was very impressed. And the first night she was in Hollywood, she was taken to a party of a producer or the producer of the film, and it was a beautiful mansion. As you can imagine, you know, and lots of cars, beautiful cars, and then she saw Elizabeth Taylor and Gary Cooper, and she was, you know, she came from Massachusetts, or this little city, and at the end, at the very end of the party, she could see that the people she came with were leaving, so she was running to them, but she got grabbed by one of the waiters or someone, you know, who is working for the producer, and they said, "No, you plan to stay. I'll take you to your room." Yeah.
Wow.
So she thought, "Oh my God." And she ran to another car because her friends had left. And she did. So, you know, she did the first gesture of she wouldn't take it. No, she,
Yeah.
And being with Jack Garfein was another sign, because he wasn't, you know, the most popular guy. And he wasn't the most beautiful guy. He was a small with a big head, and he hadn't grown because he was there. He was in the camps from the age of 13 until 15. That's when you grow. That's when you grow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was shrinking down to 43 pounds. Yeah.
Big head and
yeah.
She was her book is really interesting. Baby Doll is amazing. It really tells you much more about Hollywood than anything I've read before.